If my CEO was putting all kinds of caps on me and I couldn't do this and I couldn't do that, or I had to say it a certain way, what he's done is he started a cycle for me that allows me to cycle down too. And so because he's got this level of trust, this incredible ability to say, "Hey, no, come as you are. Seriously, seriously, come as you are." It even empowers me more to do that for everybody now that reports to me. And what I'm hoping is it does it for the people that report to them and for the people that report to them, et cetera, and so on and so on. And I'll tell you, my CEO and I are two different personalities, but we have been able to create this level of trust with each other that even when we disagree, we don't walk out and go, "Oh, man," or whatever. I
Yes.
never walk away, even when we disagree, from a conversation that makes me believe that he either doesn't trust me, doesn't trust my judgment, but he's provided clarity to me about what I am supposed to be doing and what he is expecting of me.
Yes.
And then that allows you to do it for everybody else.
Welcome to Manager, a podcast about the experiences of people leaders and how we can enable them to lead engaged, healthy, and high-performing teams. I'm Kamaria Scott, your host, and I'm thrilled to have you join us as we learn, lead, and succeed together.
Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Manager, but also welcome to the first in a series of episodes that we are doing featuring people leaders from Acklen Avenue. You're going to hear from a variety of people in the organization who lead teams. You're going to hear from today's guest, who's the COO. You're going to hear from their VP of HR, their Chief Delivery Officer, and a few other people, because I believe that in order to have a culture of great people leaders, you have to have more than just one or two. You have to have everybody being on the same page. So in this series, you're going to hear how these wonderful people leaders bring to life their values and how they lead their teams. So I am absolutely excited for today's guest. As I mentioned, she is the COO of Acklen Avenue, and she is going to share with you many things about how do you lead with intentionality and clarity? How do you create alignment and the experience that you want other people leaders to create for their teams? So, Stephanie Johnson, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Kamaria. How are you doing today?
I am doing well. Excited to have you here with us.
I'm excited to be here.
So let's just get started. I've obviously had the chance to get to know you, but I want the listeners to also get a chance to know you. Tell me a little bit about yourself, your experience leading teams, your career, and a little bit more about Acklen Avenue and what you do now.
Let's see, I won't start at birth, but I will start at, let's see, I've probably been in a space with technology, mostly technology and healthcare in some way since 2000, for the past 24 years. Started from the bottom, really. I had a big interest in technology. I had a big interest in healthcare, and that's the track that I followed. And then what happened was I ended up spending the majority of my career with companies that were in startup phases that were looking to sell their organizations or grow their company by alignment and teams and just building on those folks. And so that's the track that I've been on for the last 18 years.
Wow. So you actually have a very rich history being in tech and healthcare, which are two of my favorite spaces. So this series came about because someone on your team reached out and said to me, I really love this as a resource. And one of the questions I always ask people in any organization is, do you know good people leaders? Because I'm always looking for guests. I always want to welcome people in. And she gave me a very long list of people from your organization. I was very excited because it's not often that when you say to someone, do you know great people leaders in your organization, they can give you several names. Typically, I might get one or two. And speaking with her and in speaking with other people from your organization, one of the key themes in all of our prep calls that I kept hearing was, we all lead very, very differently, which I found so interesting. So I want to start off with, if you could describe yourself as a people leader, how would you do that? What words would you use to describe your personal leadership style?
I think that for me, thing that's most important for me is for somebody to show up as themselves. And answering that question makes me only look at myself first and my experiences first and who were my leaders throughout my career and who do I want to be. So all of those leaders have taught me how to lead. And those could be like negative things or they could be good things. But the first thing is that you have to show up as yourself. So I show up as myself. I don't want to code switch. I don't want to pretend to be anybody that I'm not. I just want to show up and bring all the things, all the good things, all the things to bear when I'm talking to people. Because when you do that, you're able to be authentic. And authentic is very important to me. Having straight conversations is extremely important to me because I know myself. I know that I'm going to make room for people. I know that I'm going to listen to them. I know where my shortcomings are because I've had all this time to work on them. And what I want to do is create a space for people. And so I come into anything that I do with folks that I have to lead, showing them authenticity, allowing them the space to be themselves when we're together, and just starting from there.
I think sometimes we start off as leaders and we get this idea in our head that a leader looks like a certain thing or sounds like a certain thing, and then we start
Yes.
trying to pretend to be whatever that is. One of the things that I really loved about what you just said is the amount of clarity that I hear about who you are and what's important to you. How did you come to that specifically? And then how might other people get to that level of clarity where when we talk about authenticity, I think that means you know who you are, you're deliberate in how you lead. How do you get to that place of being like, this is who I am, and I'm very clear about how I want to lead, the leader I want to be?
I think the most important part for that for me was finding the right organization to be with, the right CEO to be with that was going to allow me to step in and not ask me to be different. It
Mm,
starts with something like that. It starts with, that's the thing that I want to keep going. So if we talk about Acklen Avenue CEO is a fantastic guy by the name of Colin Callahan. And when he approached me about coming into this role, I was talking to 5 other CEOs. And when I was interviewing those CEOs just to see where they are. What I was looking for was what I have right now, which was the space to step into this role without any impediment or without anyone saying that I had to act or look or be a certain way. What he did was he recognized who I was. And even though I think it scared him a little bit, he recognized who I was and he was willing to take a chance on me anyway. I do believe that if you allow people to be who they are, they cascade that into the relationships that they have with the rest of the team. And
yes.
so in my opinion, on our SLT, on our senior leadership team, I'm able to come in. I've got the reins to be exactly who I am. That does not mean that I'm not going to make mistakes or any of that. It just means that I'm going to come with everything that I've learned, my full experience, my full personality. And what I did was I came in with that and I allowed others to do the same. The rest of it is like if you get a bunch of people and you're like trusting them to be who they are, come with what they know, you start crafting and chiseling down to like, hey, now I have a comfort level. I've not always had a comfort level to come into my SLT or with my CEO and say exactly what I want to say. With my
Mhm.
CEO, I say exactly what I want to say.
I love that.
And he doesn't think that I'm being, whatever, we've all had adjectives assigned to our
Yes.
personalities, but he's never assigned an adjective to me. He's just allowed me to do that. And over time, he's trusted and understands me. And that's exactly what I have created for the teams that I'm running now.
There's two things about what you said that I absolutely love, and I want to just take time to pick those things apart. One is the relationship between you and your COO. One of the interesting things that I considered when I was naming this podcast Manager to Manager was that people would think that, oh, I'm just talking about first level managers or middle managers. But everybody who has a box underneath their box is a manager and is creating an experience for the person underneath them.
Yes.
And so maybe you don't do the exact same things at a higher level, but there is this awareness of, as someone who is a people leader with a direct report, I have a responsibility to create an experience for someone else. So I love that you started off by talking about your relationship with your own people leader. And I'm wondering if you have thoughts about when we get to a certain level in the organization, does it matter less how our relationship is with our people leader? Or is it equally important to report to somebody who still might give you feedback, who still cares about supporting you? Are those things still as important at the level that you're at as a COO?
Yes, it's very important because if my CEO was putting all kinds of caps on me and I couldn't do this and I couldn't do that, or I had to say it a certain way, what he's done is he started a cycle for me that allows me to cycle down too. And so, because he's got this level of trust, this incredible ability to say, hey, no, come as you are. Seriously, seriously, come as you are. It even empowers me more to do that for everybody now that reports to me. And what I'm hoping is it does it for the people that report to them and for the people that report to them, et cetera, and so on and so on. And I'll tell you, my CEO and I are two different personalities, but we have been able to create this level of trust with each other that even when we disagree, we don't walk out and go, oh man, or whatever. I
Yes.
never walk away, even when we disagree, from a conversation that makes me believe that he either doesn't trust me, doesn't trust my judgment, but he's provided clarity to me about what I am supposed to be doing and what he is expecting of me.
Yes.
And then that allows you to do it for everybody else.
I love that because that then goes into my second question, which is about paying it forward. And one of the things that you were very emphatic about was creating space for other people, having experienced it for yourself, paying that forward to your teams and creating that same sort of environment. So I'm wondering if you can just give us a little bit more in terms of we have a very vivid picture of what it looks like when he does it for you. What does it look like then for Stephanie to then give that to her own team? What are the parts of creating space for others that are hallmark to you or important to you in thinking about how you create an experience?
My SLT is very different from me. We're all very different from each other. It's incredibly different. And so what I want to do and what I have done or what I think I've done, you have to ask them if this is 100% true, is I ask a lot of questions. One of the things for me is in this role, if you're a COO or listening to this podcast, if you're COO, you already know that sometimes you get to those solutions fast. Like that's your job. But for me, I think creating space is allowing people to show their what are your opinions. So I ask a lot of questions. I actually invite opposing ideas.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. I love for you to come and say, well, I think differently, or I think this, or I think that, because it invites conversation. And if you do that, you know that you're going to get to the right solution. And so the way is for me to make space for them is to ask a lot of questions and also trust their judgment.
Mm-hmm.
We will be in SLT meetings. We're in meetings a lot. And you start to build relationships with people where I get to a point now where I'm like, well, what are you recommending?
Yes.
And then say, okay, go with your recommendation. Or if we're not getting to it, I'm relying on people to come up with the best solutions because they're right next to that problem. But what I'm also hoping that I'm teaching them is to invite the conversation, and it might be against what you think. But at
Mm-hmm.
the end of the day, we have to come up with the very best solution. And so that to me, that's making space for people. That's also making space for people to we all bring our emotions into our job. If you love your job, you're going to be emotional. I love my job. I'm emotional. Like sometimes my voice raises and I'm super excited about something, and other people can take that a different way, right?
Yes.
I never take that a different way. Never. If you're quiet, I'm not taking that a different way. But I want to get to a point where wherever you're at, you feel this level of comfort to come and bring that stuff. And that is making space.
Yes.
It's not a big deal. It's just literally allowing people to have a different opinion than you do and being
Mm-hmm.
open that maybe your solution is not the best solution, no matter where you are in the leadership role.
It's an interesting perspective because what I hear coming through still is that wonderful theme of authenticity of I'm going to let them be who they are. And so sometimes they may come in with, very boisterous opinions, or sometimes they may be a little bit more delayed and they may need to think things through. Or from where they sit, they may have just a different viewpoint of something we're discussing based upon their own experience, their own backgrounds, their own expertises. And I'm welcoming all of those things into the conversation. So I'm also hearing not only making space and authenticity, but I'm also hearing inclusion. I'm making sure that everybody has the opportunity to show up and have a seat at the table and enter the conversation. And the willingness to say, even though I am, air quotes, the leader, that doesn't necessarily mean I have all the answers. I'm actually leaning into your expertise because we are all different, and that is what actually makes us great.
Yes, absolutely. When they introduce me as their boss, it seems so foreign to me because in my mind, my CEO does this too. So sometimes if I'm out somewhere with him and I'm like, this is my boss calling, he's like, that's just weird. And it is. I don't think about that. I think about them as a partner in helping me make a decision. If I have to be like my job is to make the right decision, but I can't make the right decision without everybody's input. And so on SLT, I need to hear all sides. I need to hear their side. I
Yeah.
know all sides because my job is to know what's going on in everybody's division, but it's very important that we hear if you disagree, why, and have that conversation. It's just so important. You can't make the right decisions without that information.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. And even with the curiosity, I think sometimes the goal is not even to know what outcome, but how did you get to that outcome? I really want to understand the way that you're thinking or the rationale, because as you said earlier, you may have a different point of view or you may have a different solution than the one I proposed. And it's not necessarily that one's wrong or right. It's the conversation that helps us to see, well, if I look at it this way, I would come to this solution or that solution. And then you start to understand how each other thinks. And when you
Yeah,
understand how each other thinks, I think that's another way that you're building trust amongst the team because you know this person's going to bring this perspective. I'm going to bring this perspective. And maybe the right solution is somewhere in the middle.
correct. You've talked to a couple of our senior leadership. You probably have identified that they're also both very, very different. And so when I'm coming with a particular issue, I know what they're thinking. I know what they're probably going to first because they're different. And the differences are what you need on a team. You do not want to have people who look the same and think the same as you. You guys will never do anything like you're never going to progress. And so, like, I already know that when I'm coming with a particular issue or a particular issue is coming up, I already know might be more analytical where another person's really, really leaning into the empath side of their leadership, people leading into the technical side of their leadership. But you need all of those things.
Hmm.
You need every single one of those things. I wouldn't tell them to change because they need to be part of the mix of the conversation. They invite conversation. If you don't have it, you're just going to agree and you do that whole group thing that never gets you anywhere.
Yes. The theme that comes to mind for me when I was listening to all of you talk and doing all of your prep calls was unity with variety. You're all aligned, you're all on the same page, but you are leading in your own way. And when I think about what it takes to have a culture of great people leaders, it's not necessarily saying that every single person needs to be the same or do every single thing the same. It's we have to start with the same mindset, intention, and eye toward outcome. And then maybe we find our own path there, but we all know where we're trying to get to. So I'm curious for you with the awareness of you all are so different. And I love saying that because it comes out so evidently when I talk to you all. But then how do you also, as a COO, ensure that even though we are different and we approach things differently, that we are all rowing the same boat, we're all moving toward the same thing, and there's not so much difference that people are like, "What's happening over here?" So how do you create that unity piece, even though you all have variety?
That's going to be some very direct feedback and clarity from me. My CEO tells me which direction he would like us to go. And I'm not saying we don't have conversations or I don't push back about, well, I don't think that's the way we should go. I think we should go X. At the end of the day, I come out with a very clear message of the direction. And so when we're talking about people differences, we're talking about personality differences and how they lead. It's not, this is different to me. To me, my job is to provide clarity about the direction that we need to go and the clarity that we need to go. And I'm not going to say that we don't have conversations when somebody gets off track with that. And so, like, still, like, those to me are like very different things. My job is to provide clarity to the rest of the team to execute on what we need to do in the manner that we choose to do it in their own personality and in their own voice.
Hmm.
My job is to provide that clarity for them, and they're supposed to provide that clarity to the rest of their teams on down.
I love it. So let's talk about setting the example, because that's the theme I keep hearing in your conversation, which is my CEO does it for me. I do it for my team. And there is some research that Culture Amp did a while back that basically says that once leaders get to a certain level in an organization, they actually stop doing some of the actual management practices. But I know that one of your directs was a presenter at Disrupt HR a few months ago in Florida, and you live in Tennessee.
Yes,
And you actually came to her presentation and Jennifer's as well. And I
in
know
North
she also
Carolina.
in North Carolina. And so tell me a little bit about that from the not just I'm clearly setting the expectation with my words, but also with my behaviors.
This is where you learn your people. You learn what's important to them. And so with Jennifer, she is amazing because what happens too when you're at a leadership level, my own personal experience is this is a very lonely position because you're having to make decisions people don't always like. Nobody's patting senior leaders on the back all the time. You're like, why am I doing this? Nobody cares. Like it depends on your personality, right? Some people
Yeah.
have to be praised and some people are okay with it. But that comes from a personal experience for me of not being appreciated. And so, what's the best way for me to do that? She's a guru. Jennifer is a guru in her space. Like, oh, you're going to go speak? I'm going. This is part of bringing in your entire self into your job, all of
Mhm.
your experiences. And so, what I wanted to do was to make sure that she knew that I appreciated her. And the way that she receives that appreciation is for me to show up and be there and be her second. I'm not in that room with her to stand out. I'm in that room with her to cheer her on and to let her know that I support her and that I think that she's as smart as everybody else thinks she is. And that's just one way because we don't have a ton of ways to do that. But that's what I know would be her language.
Yes.
It's like, show up for her. And so that's exactly what I do. And then when it comes to Chelsea, same thing. Chelsea is amazing. She did an amazing job. And I was honored to be in that audience, looking at them on stage and being so authentically proud to be associated with her, not as her boss, but as someone who works with her every single day. But it doesn't just stop with our SLT. Those are just two examples of showing interest, true
Mhm.
interest. 88% of our organization is Latin American. I want to learn about their culture. I really do want to learn and know about what's going on in their lives and what's going on in their country and how do they think about things. I want to talk to them. I want to ask questions about them. I'm truly curious about what's going on in their lives and their children and their mothers. I always love meeting people's parents. It tells me a lot. And it really does break down the barrier. It breaks down the barrier immediately. I actually looked up Latin American holidays and I had a lot of questions about like, what does that mean? Or what is Mexican Mother's Day? There's other holidays that we've written into our policies. We allow Semana Santa. It's an Easter holiday that is celebrated by Latin Americans. And we are like, hey, take it off. Please enjoy your family. One of the policies that we changed when we got here was expanding our maternity leave to paternity and partners, things like that, because fathers in the Latin American community are very involved with their children.
Yes.
It's incredible to see. And so that natural curiosity, if you really go into it from a personal experience, it influences your business practices
You know,
to the positive.
I was honestly excited to talk to both you and Chelsea because a lot of times when we are talking about people leadership, we're talking about culture, sometimes people try to dump that into the HR bucket. That's an HR thing and they should be taking care of that. But I feel like I have found that most of it coming to life, while HR sort of might write the official policy on a piece of paper, it comes to life in people's day-to-day work. It comes to like in the operations side. And so I'm wondering if there's tangible results that you can see, not necessarily in just people feel better, but we operate as a business better because of these things.
Absolutely. I think that the culture at Acklen is something that is very unique and it's been built far before I got here. What I'm hoping has happened is that we have continued it because I've learned what it is. So there were a lot of things too when I first got here that I was like, what policy is this? And why are we doing X? That the people that are in our organization, our teams, educated me on.
Mhm.
It's like, no, because our healthcare doesn't work this kind of way, or something that, like in some Latin American countries, those folks are supporting their grandmothers, their aunts, their uncles. And that's not something that we do in the United States. And so
Mhm.
stuff like that and understanding what's important to them and how it works for them. This is part of that whole like, no, 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 tell me when I'm wrong and let me understand it. And then I'm going to learn. Right. It would have been a terrible thing if I'd come in and made a policy change that I didn't consider those things for.
Yeah.
So I see it because I think it's in the culture of our organization. People continue to want to work here.
I can see that from your conversation, from Chelsea, from Jennifer. I can see the very strong culture of wanting to put people first, still understanding that it impacts how people also do their jobs, how they perform for the organization. So I love that. I want to switch gears just a little bit because one of the things that you mentioned earlier was that it's your job to know what's going on in all of the departments in all of the business. And when I think about alignment and I think about helping organizations to be on the same page, there are some practices that have become commonplace. Like you should have a quarterly alignment meeting where you're sharing results and things of that nature. And I find that sometimes those things can become habit or routine, but we sort of miss the point of why we're doing it. Whether it's culture, whether it's policy, whether it's process, with somebody who it's your whole job to know, how do you go about being deliberate about gathering the information about the curiosity that helps you say, yes, this is working, or no, it's not working, or this message got to where it needed to be? How do you go about doing that?
For Acklen specifically, I was brought on because of my experience with EOS. So it's a business operating system. You start with your SLT to get them comfortable with how you're supposed to come to these meetings and what you're supposed to share, how you're supposed to ideate, discuss, and solve. Like there's rules to EOS, right? And so you have to adopt it at the top. But even before that, part of EOS is looking at your organizational chart and understanding who's got the accountabilities. And so I'm just going to be very, very general when I say this. Our
Mhm.
CEO owns the culture. So he's going to tell us like, hey, this is what I want. This is why I started this. This is what we need to continue to do. So you start at the top of the organization, you start to build metrics and you start monitoring and measuring the things that matter to you that can tell me, like for me, we started measuring things that could tell me that would help me make decisions without going and doing extensive research.
Mhm.
You're monitoring what's working and what's not. And this occurs today. There are things that we put in place that don't work, but the metrics say they're not working. So then you get to shift in flight. You can shift in flight. It does not require you to take big, gigantic leaps. And so once SLT has this process down, now you start teaching the departments. So the leaders start teaching the departments, and then they started having their own. And then I would attend as an observer. And then when they got the right metrics, they were having the discussions. Now I just look at their dashboards and I'm like, okay, so everybody's understanding, but they change because we can tell we have metrics in place where we can tell when things are working and when they're not. Are we aligned or are we not? The biggest thing for me is that I pay attention not only to metrics, but to people. And so it's not just numbers, but it's
Mhm.
in how people respond. So if I know that we messaged something at the top and then I'm talking to somebody and they mention something, but it doesn't line with the message, I'm gonna go back and be like, oh, okay, I heard X. It makes my little yellow light go up and say, I need to go investigate a little more. I need to ask some more questions. But that's been very helpful for us to get the company lined up because in the first year I was here, it was a lot of change.
Yes.
And so you have to have a way, a formula to manage that that doesn't that doesn't kill us all, right? Now, some people will disagree that they maybe got killed and came back to life, and it was tough.
It
We're
was
still
tough.
alive. We're still alive and kicking, but for us, that's how we've managed it. And in those meetings, you have to come with problems. And
Mhm.
they don't have to be completely formulated. Like I could come in and say, I didn't see these rate changes in the system or whatever. You don't have to have your issue fully vetted. Your team is going to help you by asking you questions and saying, well, what do you mean? Where do you see? And then we get to restate that issue. And once you got the issue down and everybody understands what the issue is, then you start to discuss that issue. And then that's where you're discussing it, you're getting a little deeper, and then you come up with a solve. And so the teams know that if we see multiple problems pop up, then we didn't solve it.
Yes.
So that's how that goes down from the top down to departments, and that's how they solve their issues. But the whole metrics is how I look at it.
I love that. Do you find that this process helps people leaders underneath you? And the reason,
Absolutely.
yeah, the reason why I'm curious about that is because there was an image that I found on LinkedIn where it was this manager holding an umbrella over her team, and it said things like emails and problems and all of these things. And people sort of lauded this as like, oh, look at this manager shielding her team from the organization. And I was like, if I were a people leader, I would hate to work in an organization where I have to be the umbrella shielding my team from the crazy of the organization. And it sounds like what you're saying is let's rein in some of this chaos so that it doesn't appear and everyone's on the same page. And so I'm wondering, do you find that people leaders who are involved in this process, do they find this helpful? Does it help them manage their own teams? How do you say, yes, this is working from a people leader perspective?
I would say to that, I invite problems. I love problems. And so what you have to do and what we have done is encourage people to come with whatever their problems are. And in your mind, they could be big problems, little problems, whatever, but they're a problem for someone.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't get them to a comfort level of saying whatever their issues are, then what's going to happen is they're never going to bring them up, and they're going to fester underneath your organization. And there's like little veins that are going to crawl its way through your foundation. And then one day you're going to take a step and you just fell through the floor. You never saw it coming. The
Yeah.
other thing that people will tell you, my team will tell you, is I don't like surprises. I want you to come and tell me what's what, because I can deal with that. I need to see what's going on. I'm not going to see every single thing. That's why we have an SLT. They're going to come and tell me. But if any one of those folks, and then if any one of their folks doesn't come to tell them, hey, I got a problem with this, I got a problem with that, I'm seeing this, I'm seeing that, you will never, ever, ever solve it. It'll
Mm.
just create veins of insecurity. It will mess with your stableness of your company, and you won't know until it's too late. And so, no, we should never shield our folks. We should allow them to take the reins of being part of the solution. And the
Mm.
only way to do that is to bring their problems and make them feel comfortable and give them a place of safety. So whatever. So anybody on SLT can have a problem with anybody else in
Yes.
anybody else's division. And any department could say, I got a problem with customer success because of X. Or customer success could say, I got a problem with HR, or like it just goes around and around. If you do that, that something's not right and you can talk about it. But if you don't ever see it, what do you solve for?
Yeah.
They can even do it to me. I encourage them to say to me, Stephanie, I didn't like the way you said it, or you made a decision and you didn't come to me, or whatever it is. And I am perfectly okay with that, because that gives me a starting point to say, okay, let's talk about that. What did I do specifically? Tell me what I did. And then we can start having a conversation. And sometimes I say, you know what? I totally did. I did not take a minute to ask. I didn't ask the questions I needed to ask. I made a very rash decision. And so I will identify when I am failing, because the other thing is I am a person too. So I'm going to fail. I've made bad decisions, like, because we all do. And one thing that I do is like, and I invite you to come and tell me when I've done something that appears to you to not be something that's good for you, or when I've
Oh,
made a
I love
mistake.
that. I love that. I love the invitation. I think it brings us full circle to creating space, building trust, but most importantly, just the intentionality of how you lead and the awareness that the behaviors that you exhibit, how you lead, impact other people. And sometimes there's a misalignment between intent and impact, but you'll never know if you're not inviting that. And I think what I love about, even when you were talking about EOS, is the deliberateness in the process of inviting that back. So not like a haphazard, like I do it now because, I might have to muster up the courage to give you feedback. But if it's just a part of how we operate, that literally feedback is welcomed and encouraged, and I model it and you see it, it becomes a part of that culture. This has been
Yes.
an amazing conversation. Is there anything else? I feel like you have so much wisdom. It's always a treat to have a COO or someone who is really a senior leader in the organization, but also a people leader who takes the role seriously, to chat with us. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we run away?
I would like to just say that, like, no matter what, CEOs and COOs are people too.
Mm-hmm.
And so the best thing you can do for them is to also apply the things to them that they are applying to you. I recently had someone ask me, well, how do you deal with criticism? And I'm like, I've learned to deal with criticism because I want to be the best person I can be. And whether that's in the job that I'm in or as a person, I still am a person who has room to learn and to grow. And that's what I'm trying to tell people, but sometimes it doesn't come across because the title is such a big stop for people in their mind. But your COO, your SLT, they are people too, and they're going to make mistakes. And you're part of helping them to be better. So do that.
Oh,
Help them be better.
I love that. I'm going to carry that forward for the listeners. Definitely think about the experience that has been created for you. And again, there's things to learn, whether it's good or it's bad. But think about, if it's good, how might you recognize or share that with your people leaders that they know? Do more of that. If it's something that's not leading you the way that is impactful for you or helping you to do your job better, share that. Be bold and be brave to help that people leader grow, but also be intentional about the experience that you are creating for other people. So the thing to pay forward with your own teams is the willingness to ask, the impact that you're having on them, if you're helping them do their jobs, if you're leading them effectively, and thinking about how you might adjust your own personal leadership style to do that. So this has been a wonderful episode. I want to remind you that it is just episode 1 of the series that we have featuring people leaders from Acklen Avenue. I encourage you to stay tuned to the next episode, which will drop next week, and be listening for themes in people leadership and things that you can bring back to your organization. So on behalf of Stephanie and myself, thank you for listening to this episode of Manager to Manager, and take care of yourselves until we see each other again.